So do you remember Casey Anthony? I can't remember I don't think I was doing talk radio back in the day when Casey Anthony's case was going on. But I want to start Casey Anthony's case where it should start with, which is a picture of her deceased daughter, Caylee. And Robert Griffin Jr. III posted this. He said, "Don't share that Casey Anthony video. Share this picture of Caylee Anthony, who had so much more life to live." And she did. She was 2. Now, I do want to get to the Casey Anthony video for a reason. And it's not to comment necessarily about Casey Anthony. And if you don't remember the case of her, no pun intended, I'll give you a little bit of review of what she didn't do, which led people to believe that she did for her daughter, because there's a lot she didn't do and a lot she actually did, which is one of the reasons why I have a contrarian view of Casey Anthony being a legal advocate. And I don't do contrarian views just to poke at things or do clickbait. That's not what I do. Or listen bait. That's not what I do. But there is a degree of corruption in our legal system, and I have taken advantage of it. Representing myself in traffic courts, I've taken advantage of. It's not necessarily corruption. It can be corruption, particularly if you're an unethical lawyer. But our legal system is something that can be cracked and hacked, and it's something that if you know what you're doing, or you spend the time to study it, you can get outcomes you would not expect in court. And Casey Anthony got an outcome that I think is perverse and wrong, and I think the jury got it incredibly wrong. And I think in her case, in my opinion, her lawyers were pretty unethical, pretty corrupt. But corruption is part of the American system. You right now are living through a period of time where either corruption is going to reign on our financial system, or it's going to take a huge step back. And this is going to be determined, in my judgment, by the decisions about the deep state and what they're allowed to do in regard to forcing the presidential branch to do their bidding. That's what's at stake. Now, your retirement account is leaning back and forth on a precipice to an America right-sized, where the judiciary isn't controlling the executive branch, where the deep state isn't controlling it, or where it is. So you need to be set up to retire either way, which requires, in my judgment, risk management and active management of every single portfolio, which is exactly what Bulwark Capital Management does. My friend Zach Abraham, the chief investment officer there, is putting on a free live webinar coming up the 25th of this month at 3:30 Pacific. He's going to talk about kind of creating a Department of Government or retirement efficiency for you. He's going to talk about their brand of risk management. They're going to talk about 2025 and the long-term outcome and how they're always looking to lower costs and to take advantage of volatility, which can actually be your friend. This is a free live webinar, but you have to register to attend. Go to knowyourriskradio.com. That's KNOW, knowyourriskradio.com. Bulwark Capital Management is an investment advisor representative of Trek Financial LLC, and SEC registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 125-37. So Casey Anthony went 30 to 31 days without reporting her little girl missing. So it was her mom who actually said, "Hey, Casey, we would like to see our granddaughter." And Casey didn't communicate with them. She'd recently moved out of the family home. She'd been living there in her early 20s with her little girl, and she didn't communicate with her mom. Finally, the mom took it very, very seriously and wanted to find her daughter and granddaughter. So when she got with Casey, she sat her down and said, "Where is Caylee?" And at this point, Casey said she didn't know. But she thought the little girl was with a babysitter. And the mom said, "You think?" And the mom called 911. And Casey sort of resentfully, lackadaisically got on the phone. And the dispatcher actually asked her, "Why didn't you call us?" And she said, "Well, I thought I could handle this on my own." And that was clearly a stupid decision. And she provided a name of a babysitter, and the police came over. They took this report, and then they started to hang out with Casey, but they treated her as a witness, which was really smart. So she didn't feel like she was going to be booked and arrested. Now, incidentally, Caylee Anthony was allowed to lie about graduating from college. So her parents, she lied to her parents that she was continuing college. I think it was an entire semester that she just partied, didn't attend a single class. And her parents had this suspicion, but she just continued to lie and to weave these lies. And she's really, really good at lying. Hint, hint. When they discovered that she lied, instead of saying, okay, you're going to pay us back every single dime for that semester, they put on a party at their house and allowed Caylee to sit there with family friends who were celebrating her great achievement of having graduated college. In prepping for this, I watched a little mini documentary about this, and there's a picture of Caylee smoking a cigar, apparently at her college graduation party at her home of her parents. So this continued to get more and more bizarre. The cops took her around, driving around. Okay, so where did you meet the nanny? She provided a name of a guy that she worked with at a studio, Nickelodeon. They drove her to this house. Yeah, it was right there. That's where he lives. And this other house, and this is where this person lives, and here's the last place I saw her, and this is where the nanny lives, and the nanny's from New York, and her parents are divorced, and she has a college, and she just laying out all this stuff. Ultimately, they drove her to Nickelodeon and said, what's your job here? Oh, I'm an event coordinator. Oh, cool. Show us your office. They walked around the lot for 25 minutes. And finally, as I recall the story, Caylee Anthony stopped, put her hands in her back pocket, and laughed nervously. I don't really work here. She hadn't worked there for a couple of years. And in her mind, the police aren't going to figure this out. So clearly, they were building up, watching her in these series of lies. And there was no nanny. That person did not exist. The guy, she said, introduced her to the nanny, never met her. He had left Nickelodeon about 2 years before she was even there. She was never an event coordinator. She stood at kiosks asking people to purchase pictures taken with their kids. Not only did that guy not exist, he didn't have kids. The nanny didn't exist. He didn't exist. In 31 days, not reporting her daughter missing. Ultimately, the police found the skeletal remains of this little girl buried by the Anthony home in a Winnie the Pooh blanket with duct tape around the area where her face would have been. So, airtight case. Circumstantial evidence, no physical evidence tying her to the scene of that crime, but all sorts of circumstantial evidence. Then she went to court. And when she was on trial, her attorney came out and issued a surprise. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Here is Caylee Anthony making her announcement that she's now a legal advocate. She's doing this from her car for reasons of privacy, she says.
I sweat to death. Okay. Today is Saturday, March 1st, 2025. This is my first of probably many recordings on a series that I'm starting. I am a legal advocate. I am a researcher. I've been in the legal field since 2011. And in this capacity, I feel that it's necessary, if I'm going to continue to operate appropriately as a legal advocate, that I start to advocate for myself and also advocate for my daughter. For those of you who don't know, my name is Caylee Anthony. My daughter is Caylee Anthony. My parents are George and Cindy Anthony. This is not about them. This is not in response to anything that they have said or done. That's not to say that I'm not going to respond at some point to some of the things that they have said and done.
And speaking of said and done, we'll get to some of the things the father has said and some of the things that Caylee said about them through her attorney. Because in this surprise moment in court, where all the circumstantial evidence pointed to her, where she went through these series of unbelievable lies, where she was actually hanging out, partying with a boyfriend while her daughter was missing, they ultimately found her, as I recall, smoking pot with him and watching TV. This surprise announcement came about. So when she's referencing things her parents have said, she might be referencing that. But now she gets down to the job pitch and reasons why you should subscribe to her services.
The whole point of this is for me to begin to reintroduce myself. I'm doing this both personally for me, but in a professional capacity. Moving forward, the majority of what you will see will be me speaking in a professional capacity. My goal is to continue to help give a voice to people, to give people tools and resources that they can utilize so they actually know where they can turn to. So with that, please join me on Substack. If you have questions, I will set up an email address where we can correspond directly. Up until this point, that has never happened. And it's only going to be on a limited basis regarding legal issues, legal matters. One of the main reasons that I'm doing this, there are people close to me who have been targeted and attacked recently. There are also people close to me who have had some recent things occur.
She goes on, of course, to mention LGB, so-called TQ people, because you have to. So she's coming out as a legal advocate, Caylee Anthony, who, in my judgment, probably her little girl. Now, here's why I think she's be a really good coach. She watched her attorney walk in with bombshells heretofore never mentioned. One of her things the attorney did was come out and say, Caylee Anthony did not end the life of her child. Her child drowned in a pool. The family pool. That's what happened. And Caylee Anthony panicked because there were things that went on in that home that she wasn't allowed to talk about. She couldn't. She had to hide the family secrets. So in that courtroom, that attorney claimed that Caylee Anthony's father had abused her body. And he got very graphic in that. Interestingly, in watching this documentary, there were all these scenes, or at least one, where Caylee Anthony was in tears, sobbing, as her father talked about how he missed her, how he wanted to give her one of those big bear hugs. And she said, I love you too, knowing that she's being filmed. There'd never been charges like this. She'd only recently moved out of the family home. She'd allowed her little girl to stay in the family home without her, to allow that man to babysit her. The sad fact of the matter is, Caylee Anthony watched, in my judgment, a jury expertly manipulated, emotionally and rhetorically, into an understandable decision because the prosecution did not have the physical evidence tying Caylee Anthony to the end of that little girl's life. That's the piece they lacked. But in every other manner, they had convicted her. See, our legal system is the best one going when it's actually applied, but it's always going to be flawed because of the human sin desire, the sin desire to lie, the sin desire to wag your power over others, the sin power to deceive, or the sin desire to deceive. In my judgment, this gets so imbued in the legal system because the legal system is so easily hacked. I've hacked the legal system to beat camera tickets. Now, I was right. I simply looked at how the law was written, and when I got these camera tickets and I read the law, oh, wait a minute, there's no warning sign before that intersection that has the camera ticket. There has to be a warning sign. I think it was 150 feet or maybe 1,500 feet. I don't remember. I think it was 150 feet before the intersection. It wasn't there. I drove past, took a video, presented that to the prosecutor when I walked into court, and the prosecutor dismissed the ticket. Then they hit me again, having put the warning sign up, but in the wrong place. So I walked back in and showed it to the same prosecutor, and he did the same thing. I've done this with HOV lane tickets. I won a case in an appeals court because the state of Washington was incorrectly applying the federal legal statute or enabling statute. So when careful reading of the law can lead you to defend yourself, that's one thing. But it's another thing to watch an expert emotional manipulator, and that's who I think Caylee Anthony is an expert manipulator of emotion, an expert liar who does a great job of seeming like she's telling all these truths, when in fact, Caylee Anthony is a brutal liar. That's why I think she'd be a good legal advocate. Incidentally, this case continues to resonate with young people. This is a young person, and we're arguing about how old she is. I think she's between 14 and 16. My producer, Alex, thinks she might be 20. This case continues to resonate.
So Casey Anthony is now on TikTok and other social media platforms, claiming that she's an advocate for her daughter that she and other victims. First of all, the audacity must be on sale because she has way too much of it. She is brave, I'll give her that, to come on social media and show her face. But Casey, 30 days. You didn't report your daughter missing for 30 days. You continued to party. Remember Zanny the nanny? Remember when you lied and took investigators to Disney World claiming that you worked there and you didn't? Why?
There's a reason that this case continues to resonate, and we continue to see commentary. After Casey had been, she'd been let off, her father issued a statement that he thinks that Casey that little girl before she took her life. That's what Casey was probably referencing in terms of things her parents have said to which she's not going to reply. Fact of the matter is, in a sad way, Casey Anthony would be great at coaching attorneys on how to emotionally manipulate people, because sadly, that's also part of the American, well, in fact, global sin problem as broken beings.